Hey everybody, happy Monday. I hope everybody's doing really well out there today. One of the things that I've noticed over the past few months, looking through comments and that sort of thing, is that a lot of my videos tend to overlook a very specific segment of my user base, and that's Raspberry Pi users. So in today's video, we're going to set up an entire home media server using a Raspberry Pi 4. Now, we are going to kind of step to the side of what we've been doing for about the past 5 months. We're not going to use Open Media Vault for this particular setup. We're going to use something called DockSTARTer, which is it's still a Docker implementation. It still uses a lot of the same images that we've used in a lot of the tutorials that I've done to this point. But again, we're going to just focus on Raspberry Pi users for this setup. So I want to make sure that they're not left out for any of the stuff that's on my channel. So let's take a look at what we're going to need to get this going. Okay, so let's talk about what we're going to need here. Of course, I'm using a Raspberry Pi, specifically a Raspberry Pi 4 with 4 gigs of RAM. Of course, you can use other models if you'd like. That's just what I'm using. You'll also need a micro SD card to boot off of. So I'm going to be using a 32 gig micro SD card here. And then for storage, because that micro SD card is going to fill up very, very fast, I'm going to use a 1 terabyte USB drive to put all of the media on. So as I mentioned, we're not going to be using Open Media Vault for this setup. We're actually going to be using a Raspbian base. So you'll need to go to raspberrypi.org/downloads and click on the Raspbian link that's there. And then on the next page, you'll see that there are some different options, and I'll be using the Raspbian Buster Lite version for this. Go ahead and click on download and download that to your system. So once that file has downloaded, go ahead and extract it, plug your micro SD card into your computer, and then open a program like Balena Etcher. So once you're in Etcher, you can go ahead and select the image file that you just extracted, then select the micro SD card that you plugged in, and then go ahead and click on Flash. So that'll take a couple of minutes to do what it needs to do. When it's done, go ahead and unplug the micro SD card, but then immediately plug it back in. So now go ahead and open up your file browser, go over to this PC and look for the boot drive. Open that, right-click inside and create a new text document named SSH, and be sure to delete the .txt so that the file name is only SSH. You will get a pop-up asking if you're sure that you want to change the file extension. Say yes to that, and then you should be good to go. Now you can remove the micro SD card from your computer and plug it into your Raspberry Pi, and then you can go ahead and attach all of the other cables, making sure to plug in the power cable last, as it will automatically turn your Raspberry Pi on unless you have a switch in place like I do. So once your Raspberry Pi powers on, it'll go through an initial boot sequence. It'll reboot after resizing some partitions, and now we can actually get into the installation of all the good stuff. So the next thing we need to do is open a program like PuTTY so that we can SSH into the Raspberry Pi. So once you figured out what your Raspberry Pi's IP address is, whether you go through your router or whatever, go ahead and type in that address right here and leave it on port 22 and click OK. Or open rather. So then you're going to log in. Normally we would log in as root, but we're not going to do that. We're going to log in as Pi, and then the password is Raspberry. And here we go. Now we are logged into our Raspberry Pi 4. Now we're going to run a series of commands. Now all of these will be available in the blog post linked in the description down below. Now the first thing we want to do is actually update everything we need to update the Raspberry Pi so that everything is current and will work the best way possible. So of course we'll run sudo apt-get update. That just took a couple of seconds there. Now the next thing we need to do is run a sudo apt-get dist update. So this is just making sure that everything is upgraded completely. The first one was just looking for updates. Now we're actually going to implement updates. So we'll say yes, we want to do that. We'll give this a second to do what it needs to do here. Okay, so that's done. Now the next thing we need to do is install curl and get, or git rather. So we'll do sudo apt-get install curl git. Now it's saying, hey, it's going to take about 33 megs. That's fine. Go ahead and say yes to that. And we'll let this install. Okay, so now we're going to install a couple of scripts. The first one will just be a Docker script to get Docker up and running. So again, all of these commands will be available in the blog post linked in the description down below. But this is the first bash command where we're getting the script from get.docker.com. Okay, so once that's done, the next thing that we're going to do is actually install the DockSTARTer script here, and it's going to be very similar. Again, this will be in the blog post, but this is where we're getting the install script from get.dockstarter.com. And it's going to go ahead and configure everything that it needs to in conjunction with the Docker script that we just installed as well. So this is where it's going to install the kind of the overlaying operating system for DockSTARTer in order to move on to the next step where we'll install everything after a quick reboot. Okay, and now that that's done, as I mentioned before, we can go ahead and just do a quick reboot. And then we can start actually installing applications on our Raspberry Pi. Okay, so now we've rebooted and we've logged back in via SSH into our Raspberry Pi. In order to get the DockSTARTer implementation started, all we've got to do is type in ds into our command prompt here and press enter. We'll give this a second to launch. Okay, that was pretty quick. So next thing we've got to do is what I like to do here is actually set up the variables that we're going to need here. And this is going to come into play in just a second. So we're going to go to set global variables. So the reason I wanted to come here is to look at this. So what we're looking at is the downloads directory, the audiobooks, books, comics, movies, music, and TV. Because we want to mount all of these directories here to the external hard drive that we've already plugged in. So before we do that, what we need to do is actually mount our hard drive to the system in such a way that this will be easy to modify to mount everything there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say yes because I want to kind of get out of there. And I don't want to run compose yet. And then what I'll do is I'll actually say exit because now I know what I need to do in order to get the path for mounting everything. So the first thing we've got to do is we're going to run sudo fdisk-l, and that's going to tell us the information about our hard drives that are attached here. So we've got, so this first device is the onboard storage. And the micro SD card in this case, I guess. And then what we've got here is dev SDA1. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to mount dev-/SDA1. So what I want to do is I want to mount that dev-SDA1 to the mnt/HDD. Now, if I do this, it's probably going to tell me that that directory isn't available because I haven't actually created it yet. So what we'll do then is we'll navigate to home, and then we'll go back a couple of directories here. Now we can see right here, we've got that mount directory there. So we're going to do cd mnt, and then there shouldn't be anything in there. But what we'll do is we'll say, actually we'll do a sudo su, that way we don't have to keep typing in sudo. So we'll do a sudo mkdir, so for make directory, and we'll say hdd, just like that. So now if I do an ls for list, it should show me that HDD directory. So now I'll just come back. Oops. All right, never mind. Holy cow, that was annoying. So let's mute that. So let's go ahead and put that back in there. So now we're going to mount our external hard drive to mnt/HDD, like so. So then let's see if we do cd HDD. So here you can see I've got some other stuff in here, and what we're specifically looking for really, there's a good chance you may not have anything in here if this is a fresh hard drive. I've used this on several projects over the past several months. In fact, while I was doing this yesterday, I was actually playing with this and getting it set up. So if you've got nothing here, that's fine. The system will automatically create this media library folder in there. So what we can do now is go back to DS so that we can start DockSTARTer. Okay, so what I want to do is actually click on configuration here. And I want to set the global variables. It's important to set global variables first before you do anything else here. Otherwise, things go wonky and quit working and whatnot. So setting global variables is important first. So we'll go ahead and say OK there. We don't want to keep these settings. We do want to change some stuff in here. So where it says, would you like to keep the global settings? We're going to say no. I actually want to enter a new time zone here because I don't live in Chicago. So I'm going to change that to Denver. I don't live in Denver either, but I'm close enough that it makes sense. So we'll go ahead and say OK. So we're going to go ahead and say keep current for DockSTARTer. For the host name, that's fine. We'll go ahead and say OK. Using the 1000 for the PUID and the PGID is just fine for this. The configuration directory is fine right there. You can leave that alone. You can go ahead and set permissions. That's fine. Say yes. So now what we want to do is actually change this one. And what we're going to do is we're going to say enter new. And we're just going to come down here to right after MNT. We're going to put in HDD and a slash and say OK. And then we'll say yes. It says it was created successfully, so that's good. So we'll go and click OK. Now we're going to do the same thing for the next several of these. We're going to say enter new. This is where we're mounting our audiobooks, our movies, our TV shows, that sort of thing. And this is why we tried to just make it easy and say HDD. We mounted it to MNT/HDD, and then it's gone ahead and it'll go ahead and create these folders for you. We'll go ahead and say OK. We'll say yes from that, and then we'll say enter new. And we're just going to do this HDD thing for all of these for the next several screens here. We'll set permissions. Again, enter new. For movies, again, HDD/OK, set permissions, enter new. So this part's a bit repetitive. I'm sure that this could be automated, but I'm not going to. I will say yes. Oops. And that one is fine for the Docker share directory. We'll go ahead and say OK, and then say yes, and OK. And then we'll go ahead and run compose. That's fine. So right now what it's doing is it's installing an application that will then keep all of our Docker containers updated, much like Watchtower will. This runs on a cron job. I think by default it's set to run every 4 hours to look for updates and apply them as necessary. So now it's installing Portainer. It looks like it's got some kind of pre-selected applications that it's going to go ahead and install here. So it's going to go ahead and create those 2 containers, and then we can actually start installing the applications that we want to install here. So we'll go ahead and say DS again, and then we'll go to configuration yet again, and then we'll select apps as the second option there. Okay, so after a bit of a wait there, now you can go through using your up and down keys on your keyboard. You can select the, actually we don't want to do that one. You can go through and just select which of these that you'd like to install here. Just move up and down, and then when you get to the one you want, tap the spacebar on your keyboard and just keep going through. And just select everything that you want to install here. I'm I'm a big fan of net data. That one's always a lot of fun to have on there. And of course, like I said, you can select any of these that you'd like to. There's a lot of really great applications in here by default. So we'll go ahead. Oh, Samba's always good. You'll want Samba for shares. So go ahead and select that. That one I would say is kind of a requirement in my opinion. So we'll go ahead and just select all of the different options that we want here. And I think that's good for what we're going to do here. Of course, you can make any of those selections you'd like. So now we'll go ahead and click on OK. And then it's going to go through a process. It should start going through a process of downloading and installing all of those different applications for us. And yes, we would like to run Compose now. And so now we just hang out and wait until this is done. And of course, the more applications you chose, that sort of thing, the longer this will probably take. A lot of that, of course, will depend on things like your internet speed, as well as actually the read and write speed of your micro SD card. So if you can get a fast micro SD card, that will actually benefit you here in this case. So like I said, we'll just hang out and wait for this to finish, and then we'll come back and take another look. Okay, so once you get to the screen where it shows all of the containers that you selected and they all say done, that means everything is installed. So what we can actually do here, let me pop open a web browser tab here. We can go to our IP address. We're going to go to 32, and then we're going to go to port 9000. And hey, there's Portainer, just like we're familiar with if you followed any of my other videos in the past. So we're going to go ahead and create a password here. Say create user, and there we go. So now if we open this up, you can see we've got 19 containers there. There are all of the different programs or the applications that we have run. Now the next thing that we want to do is actually see if we can get into oops. All right, so what we want to do, in fact, let me do that again. I've just opened up a file browser here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do // just two of those, and I'm going to type in the IP address of the Raspberry Pi, and that's going to bring us to this folder. And this is where that Samba application that we installed is very important, because this is going to give us access to copy over music and movies and TV shows and documents and files and whatever. So we're going to do this, but there's no password. So I believe, yeah, the username and the password is DS. So it's DS for the username and DS for the password. It's not documented anywhere that I have found. So once you're in here, of course, you'll be able to see all of the folders that we went through and moved when we set up, after we mounted the hard drive. So now you can see the movies, music, TV shows, that sort of thing. All of your configuration files are going to be in here. So basically that's it. That's all you need to do in order to get everything set up. Of course, you may need to go in and manually set up some different things. Like if you wanted to use MB, for instance, we would do 192.168.1. In my case, .32 colon and then 8096, like so. And then of course, then MB would load up. You'd go ahead and go do your setup here. And we're just going to say DB Tech. I'll give it a password. I'm only going to show on this one application just because this one's a little bit different. But so what I want to do is show how to add a library to this. If you installed Plex or Jellyfin, this would be the same process. So you would select movies, for instance, then select your folder. And then if you scroll down, you should eventually find movies. So you can select that and click OK. Oops. Let me try that again. Nope. Movies. Let's try that again. Sometimes things go weird. We'll just type in / movies like that. And then we can select our language. Of course, you can adjust this for all of your preferred settings here. Oops, not Estonian, English. And then of course you can select any of these settings that you want. Here it's asking about subtitles, and of course I'm going to want those in English as well. So let's see if I can find that. And then we can go ahead and click OK. And then you could do the same thing for, TV shows, that sort of thing. Of course, then, /TV and click OK, and then go through that same process for all of the other stuff there. So that would be, again, that's for MB, Plex, Jellyfin. All of those are going to follow that same pattern there. If you wanted to, say, take a look at, oh gosh, what else? Of course, we're in Portainer, so that's, NetData. NetData is the one I wanted to show you. So we can do, 192 like this, and that should be 32. And then 1999, like so. This will show all of your activity for CPU usage, disk read and writes, RAM usage, internet usage. All of that is in there. So you can kind of have a dashboard to look at things and see what's going on. And you can always go back and see what's going on at any given point and get an idea based on that. And there's a lot of data available in here. So I'm just scrolling through that real quick, but there's a lot of data in here. So I like having net data available to go through and check things out. So I think that pretty much wraps everything up. Of course, each application is going to be a little bit different to configure, but that's how to get things installed using DockSTARTer. So there is one thing I almost forgot to mention, and that is how to add additional applications after the fact. So that's after you've installed all of this and you've decided, hey, a month later, like I really want this application. All you've got to do is go back and open PuTTY, log in to your server as, again, Pi and Raspberry, and then just run DS, and then go to configuration, select apps. And then on this screen that pops up here in just a moment, you can then go through, toggle the apps that you either want or don't want, run compose, and you should be good to go. Hey, you're still here. Well done. Sorry, this is a long video, but of course, when we're dealing with new operating systems, there's always a lot to cover. So that was the whole process of getting DockSTARTer installed and set up, and a bunch of applications set up. Of course, you can go to the IP address and then colon and then the port number that you saw listed in Portainer for each of those different applications to access them. You could do additional things if you wanted to, and that would be like setting up traffic so that you could access all of that on a domain name, so that you could have remote access to your Raspberry Pi home server, that sort of thing. If you're interested in learning how to do any of that kind of stuff, let me know in the comment section down below, and I can make a follow-up video showing how to install traffic and get it set up and configured on DockSTARTer. So again, if you're interested in that, let me know in the comment section down below. But I think with all of that being said, we've covered quite a bit today. I want to go ahead and end this before you're completely bored of hearing my voice. So if you check down below, of course, like I said a few different times during the video, there will be links to everything in the description down below. Also, while you're down there, there are some links where you can do some things to help support the channel, like there is merch directly below this video. There is also a link in the description for a coffee if you want to send me a one-time tip just to say thanks for making this video. Or if you want to become a patron over on Patreon, there are a few different levels at which you can subscribe. The $5 and $10 levels will give you access to a members-only Discord server where we can just hang out and chat about whatever you want to chat about. So, with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up here. As always, thanks for your time. I always appreciate your support, and I'll talk to you in the next video.